The scent of lavender detergent clung to my fingertips as I folded another tiny onesie, the fabric soft and worn from too many washes. The apartment was quiet, except for the rhythmic hum of the ancient refrigerator and the distant wail of sirens. A lullaby I'd grown accustomed to in this neighborhood where rent was cheap and hope was cheaper. I pressed the onesie against my chest, breathing in that clean smell, trying to find comfort in the routine. 3 months. 3 months since I'd discovered the text on Marcus's phone. 3 months since my world had shattered into pieces so small, I wasn't sure I'd ever find them all. The baby kicked, a flutter against my ribs that made me gasp. 6 months pregnant, abandoned, and so tired I could barely remember what it felt like to sleep through the night without waking in a cold sweat, reaching for a husband who was no longer there. Marcus had left with nothing but a note on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore. The baby isn't mine to raise." Except it was his. Every ultrasound, every doctor's appointment I'd attended alone proved it, but he'd convinced himself of some fantasy, some excuse that allowed him to walk away without guilt. He'd moved in with her, Cassandra, his secretary with the perfectly manicured nails and the laugh that sounded like wind chimes. I set the onesie down and moved to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. October had turned the city gray, the kind of gray that seeps into your bones and makes you forget what warmth feels like. Below, the street was alive with evening traffic, headlights cutting through the drizzle like knives. My phone buzzed. Another overdue bill, another reminder that my job as a server at Romano's barely covered groceries, let alone rent. The restaurant had been my salvation after Marcus left. Gina, the owner, had hired me despite my obvious condition, despite the way my hands sometimes shook when I carried heavy trays. "You work hard, Cara," she'd said in her thick Italian accent, patting my cheek with a weathered hand. "That's all that matters here." I grabbed my coat, a threadbare thing that had seen better years, and headed out into the damp evening. The bus ride to Romano's took 40 minutes, long enough for my feet to swell and my back to ache, but I couldn't afford the luxury of complaints. Romano's sat on the corner of 5th and Castellano, a remnant of old-world elegance in a neighborhood slowly being devoured by gentrification. Red brick, ivy climbing the walls, warm light spilling from tall windows onto the wet sidewalk. Inside, the scent of garlic and wine wrapped around me like an embrace. "Bella!" Gina emerged from the kitchen, her face flushed from the heat of the stoves. "You're early. Good. We have a special reservation tonight. Private dining room, very important guest." Something in her voice made me pause. Gina was never nervous, never flustered. But tonight, her fingers twisted the towel in her hands, and her eyes darted toward the back of the restaurant. "Who is it?" I asked, hanging my coat on the rack. She leaned close, her breath smelling of espresso. "Lorenzo Valentini." The name meant nothing to me, but the way she whispered it, like a prayer or a curse, sent a chill down my spine. "He owns half the city," Gina continued, crossing herself. "Maybe more. His family, they have influence. You understand?" I didn't. Not really, but I nodded anyway. I needed this job too desperately to ask questions. "You serve him tonight," Gina said, smoothing down my apron. "Be polite. Be invisible. Don't speak unless spoken to. Be invisible." I'd been practicing that for months. The private dining room was at the back of the restaurant, accessed through a narrow hallway lined with photographs of the Italian coast. My shoes, cheap flats that pinched my toes, whispered against the hardwood floor. I could hear voices behind the heavy oak door, low and measured, the kind of voices that didn't need to rise to command attention. I knocked softly. "Entra." The voice was deep, textured like expensive whiskey, and it slid under my skin before I even turned the handle. The room was dimly lit, candles flickering on a table set for 4. 3 men in dark suits stood near the window, their conversation pausing as I entered. But it was the man seated at the head of the table who stole the breath from my lungs. Lorenzo Valentini. Even sitting, I could tell he was tall, broad-shouldered beneath a suit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. Dark hair, perfectly styled, touched with silver at the temples. His face was all sharp angles, strong jaw, high cheekbones, a nose that looked like it had been broken once and healed even more striking, but it was his eyes that pinned me in place. Gray, cold as winter steel, and just as unforgiving. He didn't smile, didn't acknowledge me beyond a single assessing glance that traveled from my face down to my swollen belly and back up again. I felt naked under that gaze, every flaw and failure exposed. Your name. Not a question. A command. My throat was dry. Elena. Elena Morrison. Elena. He repeated it slowly, tasting each syllable. You're new. 3 months, sir. One of the men by the window, shorter, stockier, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stepped forward. Boss, we should... Lorenzo raised one hand, a subtle gesture, but the man fell silent immediately. That's when I understood. This wasn't just wealth. This was power, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Leave us, Lorenzo said, still looking at me. The 3 men exchanged glances but obeyed without question, filing past me with the efficient silence of well-trained dogs. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the room felt smaller, the air thicker. You're pregnant. Again, not a question. Yes, sir. My hand instinctively moved to my belly, a protective gesture I couldn't suppress. Where is the father? The question was so direct, so intrusive that I almost laughed. Instead, I felt tears prick my eyes, another humiliation I couldn't afford. Gone, I whispered. Something flickered across his face. Not pity, something darker, more complex. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly, and studied me with an intensity that made my skin burn. What's his name? Why does it matter? Answer the question, Elena. The way he said my name, like he owned it already, made my pulse quicken. Marcus Valentini. The silence that followed was absolute. Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but the air in the room shifted, charged with something dangerous. Marcus Valentini, he repeated slowly. My nephew. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Marcus had never mentioned family, never spoke of anyone beyond his parents who died years ago. But looking at Lorenzo now, I could see it. The same strong jaw, the same aristocratic nose, similar, but where Marcus had been charming and weak, Lorenzo was something else entirely. You're his wife. Not a question. A statement of fact that he somehow already knew. Was, I corrected, my voice barely audible. He left. For another woman. How did he know? How could he possibly know? Lorenzo stood, and I took an involuntary step back. He was even taller than I'd imagined, at least 6'3", and when he moved toward me, it was with the fluid grace of a predator. Do you know what my nephew stole from me, Elena? I shook my head, mute. $2 million. His voice was soft, conversational, but underneath it ran a current of fury so cold it made my bones ache. From a shipment that was under his protection. He blamed it on a rival family, started a war that cost me 6 good men. And then he disappeared. My hand flew to my mouth. Marcus. My Marcus, who couldn't balance a checkbook, who'd worked some vague job in logistics that he never wanted to discuss. He'd stolen from this man, from family. I didn't know, I breathed. I swear I didn't know anything about... I believe you. Lorenzo stopped inches from me, close enough that I could smell him. Bergamot and cedar, expensive and intoxicating. You have an honest face, probably why he chose you. Easy to deceive. The words stung, but they were true. What do you want from me? I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Lorenzo tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. That depends. How badly do you want revenge, Elena? What? Your husband betrayed you, left you pregnant and penniless to play house with his mistress. Don't you want him to suffer the way you've suffered? I should have said no. Should have turned and walked out of that room, out of the restaurant, back to my tiny apartment and my small, safe life, but something in his words awakened a darkness I didn't know I possessed. Yes, I whispered. Lorenzo smiled then, a slow, dangerous curve of his lips that sent heat pooling in my belly despite everything. Good, he said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers grazed my cheek and I shivered. Then you and I, Elena, are going to help each other. How? You're going to let me take care of you, and in return, you're going to help me find my nephew. I don't know where he is, but he'll come for you eventually. Men like Marcus always do. They can't resist the urge to explain themselves, to seek absolution. His thumb brushed my lower lip, and my breath caught, and when he does, I'll be waiting. This was insane. Dangerous. Everything about Lorenzo Valentini screamed threat, from the cold calculation in his eyes to the barely leashed violence in the set of his shoulders. But I was drowning, and he was offering me a lifeline, even if that lifeline was made of razors. What do you mean, take care of me? Exactly what I said. You'll move into one of my properties. I'll cover your expenses, medical bills, everything you need for the baby. You'll want for nothing. Why? The question burst from me. Why would you do that for someone you just met? Lorenzo's expression hardened. Because you're carrying a Valentini. That child is family, even if its father is a traitor, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified me. Instead, it ignited something I thought Marcus had killed. The desire to be wanted, claimed, protected. I don't know if I can— You can, he interrupted. And you will. Unless you prefer to continue serving pasta while your feet swell and your husband fucks his secretary in the apartment you used to share. The words were brutal, designed to hurt, but they worked. Rage flooded through me, hot and purifying. What do I have to do? Lorenzo's smile widened. For now, have dinner with me. He gestured to the table, and I noticed for the first time the spread of food. Antipasto, fresh bread, wine. The scent made my stomach growl embarrassingly. I'm working, I protested weakly. Not anymore. Tonight you're my guest. He pulled out a chair, waiting. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet carried me forward. I sat, and Lorenzo settled across from me, pouring water into my glass with surprising gentleness. Eat, he commanded. You're too thin. I was starving, had been for months, rationing food to make my meager paycheck stretch. I reached for the bread with shaking hands, tearing into it like a woman possessed. Lorenzo watched, something unreadable in his expression. When did you last have a proper meal? I don't remember. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. That ends now. We ate in silence, but it wasn't comfortable. The air between us crackled with tension, with possibilities both thrilling and terrifying. I could feel his gaze on me, heavy and constant, as if he was memorizing every detail. You'll come home with me tonight, he said finally, setting down his fork. We'll discuss the arrangements. Tonight, I have to— Elena. My name again, spoken like a caress and a warning. Do you trust me? No, I answered honestly. Lorenzo laughed, a sound I hadn't expected, rich and genuine. Good. Smart women don't trust men like me, but you'll come anyway, won't you? He was right. God help me, he was right. Because the alternative was going back to that empty apartment, to bills I couldn't pay, and a future that looked like nothing but struggle. Yes, I whispered. Then finish your dinner. My car is waiting. The car waiting outside Romano's wasn't just a car, it was a statement. A black Mercedes, sleek and predatory, idling at the curb with a driver who looked more like a bodyguard, tall, buzz-cut, shoulders that strained against his suit jacket. He opened the rear door without a word, his eyes scanning the street with practiced vigilance. Lorenzo's hand settled on the small of my back, guiding me forward. The touch was light, almost polite, but there was ownership in it that made my pulse race. This is Marco, Lorenzo said as I slid into the leather interior. He'll be driving us. Marco nodded once, his expression unreadable, and closed the door with a soft thunk that sounded far too final. The inside of the Mercedes smelled like leather, and Lorenzo's cologne, that intoxicating mix of bergamot and cedar that seemed to fill every breath I took. The seats were butter soft, heated against the October chill. I'd never been in a car this expensive. Marcus had driven a 10-year-old Honda with a broken air conditioner. Lorenzo settled beside me, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. He pulled out his phone, one of 3 I noticed in his jacket, and began typing with efficient precision. Where are we going? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Somewhere safe. He didn't look up from his screen. I have a property in Blackwood Heights. Secure, Private. You'll have your own space. Blackwood Heights. I'd seen it from the highway. Towers of glass and steel where the truly wealthy lived, so far removed from my world they might as well have been on another planet. I can't just leave everything, I protested weakly. My apartment, my things. What things? Lorenzo's gaze finally lifted, pinning me. The furniture that came with the unit, the clothes you've worn threadbare? Tell me, Elena. What in that apartment is worth keeping? Nothing. The answer was nothing, and we both knew it. Everything that had mattered, the life I'd built with Marcus, the future I'd imagined, was already gone. My photos, I whispered, from before. Something softened in Lorenzo's expression, so brief I almost missed it. Marco will collect them tomorrow, along with anything else you want. For tonight you have everything you need. The car glided through the city streets, and I watched my neighborhood disappear in the rearview mirror. The flickering streetlights, the corner store where I bought discounted bread, the bus stop where I'd waited in rain and snow. Part of me felt like I was betraying something by leaving so easily. But a larger part felt nothing but relief. "Why are you really doing this?" I asked, turning to face Lorenzo. He pocketed his phone and gave me his full attention. In the dim light of the car, his features were even more striking. Shadows pooling beneath his cheekbones, his gray eyes almost luminous. "I told you, the child is family. That's not all of it." A smile ghosted across his lips. "No, it's not." He leaned forward slightly, close enough that I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. "The truth is, Elena, I hate being stolen from, and Marcus didn't just take my money. He took my trust, betrayed the family name. That's a debt that requires payment, and I'm what? Collateral?" "Your leverage," he corrected, "and protection. When Marcus resurfaces, and he will, he'll expect you to be vulnerable, desperate. Instead, he'll find you under my care. It will destroy him." The coldness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, I felt a dark thrill run through my veins. Marcus had left me to drown. Why shouldn't I let his uncle pull me to shore? "And what happens after?" I pressed. "After you've used me to hurt him?" Lorenzo's hand moved to my knee, the touch burning through the thin fabric of my work pants. "That depends on you. On me. On whether you want to go back to your old life, or stay in the new one I'm offering." His thumb traced small circles on my knee, a gesture that was both comforting and possessive. I should have moved away, should have maintained some boundary, but I was so starved for touch, for gentleness, that I let his hand remain. What would staying mean? Safety, security. Everything you need for that baby. His gaze dropped to my belly. "And perhaps more, if you're brave enough." The implication hung between us, dangerous and intoxicating. This man was my husband's uncle. Whatever was building between us, this strange pull, this magnetic attraction, was wrong on every conceivable level. But God, I wanted it anyway. The car turned onto a private drive, gates opening automatically to reveal Blackwood Heights in all its intimidating glory. 30 stories of glass reflecting the city lights, fountains and manicured gardens. A doorman in a uniform that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Penthouse," Lorenzo said as Marco opened the door. "Top floor. You'll have privacy there." The lobby was all marble and gold. Contemporary art on the walls that I didn't understand but knew was expensive. Residents passed through. Women in designer clothes, men with Rolex watches, all averting their eyes when they saw Lorenzo. Not out of disrespect, but out of fear. The elevator ride was silent, except for the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. Lorenzo stood close enough that our shoulders brushed, and I found myself hyper-aware of every breath, every small movement. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. I stepped out and felt my jaw drop. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, a sea of lights stretching to the horizon. The space was enormous. Open-concept living area with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, a kitchen with appliances I didn't know the names for, hallways leading to God knew how many rooms. "The master suite is through there," Lorenzo indicated a hallway to the left. "Guest rooms down the opposite corridor. You'll take the second door on the right. It has an ensuite bathroom and a view of the park." I walked slowly into the space, my cheap shoes silent on the polished hardwood. Everything was pristine, carefully curated, like something from a magazine, nothing like the cramped, worn apartment I'd left behind. "I don't understand," I said, turning to face him. "You said this was your property, but you don't live here?" "I have several properties." Lorenzo shrugged off his suit jacket, draping it over a chair. Underneath, his white shirt was crisp, tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders. "I stay where business requires. Tonight, I'm staying here." My stomach tightened. "Here? In this apartment? Is that a problem?" "Yes." "No, I didn't know anymore. Everything was happening too fast, the ground shifting beneath my feet faster than I could find balance. I thought you meant I'd have privacy." "You will. I don't enter rooms without invitation." He moved to a bar cart, pouring amber liquid into a crystal glass. "But I'm not leaving you alone on your first night. You're in shock, whether you realize it or not. Processing trauma. Women in your condition need monitoring." "I'm not in shock," I protested, but my hands were shaking. Lorenzo crossed to me in 3 strides, capturing my trembling hands in his. His grip was warm, steady, and I hated how much comfort I drew from it. "Elena." His voice was gentler now, the command replaced with something almost tender. "When did you last feel safe?" The question broke something inside me. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them, and suddenly I was sobbing, great, heaving gasps that shook my entire body. All the fear, the loneliness, the bone-deep exhaustion I'd been carrying for months erupted at once. Lorenzo pulled me against his chest, one hand cradling the back of my head while the other wrapped around my waist, careful of my belly. He didn't speak, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just held me while I fell apart, his heartbeat steady against my ear. "I'm sorry," I gasped when I could finally breathe again. "I don't know why Don't apologize." His lips brushed my temple, sending sparks down my spine. "You've earned the right to break." I pulled back slightly, just enough to look up at him. His gray eyes were softer now, storm clouds instead of steel. There was something in his expression I couldn't name, something that looked almost like pain. "Why do you care?" I whispered. "Really? You don't know me." Lorenzo's thumb traced my jawline, wiping away tears. "I know you're stronger than you think. I know Marcus was a fool to leave you. And I know that standing here, looking at you..." He paused, something dark and hungry flashing across his face. "I know I want things I shouldn't want." My breath caught. What things? Instead of answering, he released me and stepped back, creating distance that felt like a physical loss. "You should rest," he said, his voice once again controlled. "The bedroom is ready. You'll find clothes in the closet. I had my assistant purchase essentials. If they don't fit, we'll get more tomorrow. Lorenzo." "Good night, Elena." It was a dismissal, clear and final. I wanted to push, to demand he explain what he'd meant, but exhaustion was crashing over me in waves. My feet ached, my back throbbed, and the baby was doing gymnastics against my ribs. I found the bedroom he'd indicated and pushed open the door. If the main apartment was impressive, this room was a sanctuary. King-sized bed with linens that looked cloud-soft, blackout curtains, a sitting area with a chaise lounge positioned to capture the view. The ensuite bathroom visible through an open door featured a tub large enough to swim in. On the bed lay shopping bags, designer labels I recognized from magazines. I opened one with shaking hands and found maternity clothes, soft and expensive, in exactly my size. How had he known? Because men like Lorenzo Valentini made it their business to know everything. I showered in water so hot it turned my skin pink, washing away the smell of the restaurant, the grime of my old life. The towels were Egyptian cotton, thick enough to wrap myself in twice. I pulled on a nightgown from one of the bags. Silk, ivory, falling to my ankles like water. The bed was as comfortable as it looked. I sank into it with a sigh, feeling my muscles finally unknot. But sleep didn't come. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. What had I done? I'd left my entire life behind to move in with a man who was essentially a stranger, a dangerous stranger who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. A man who was related to my husband, my missing husband, who'd stolen millions and started a war. This was insane. But God, lying in this bed, warm and safe for the first time in months, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. A soft knock made me sit up. Yes? The door opened, and Lorenzo appeared, still in his dress shirt, but with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He carried a tray. "You barely ate at dinner," he said, setting the tray on the nightstand. "Tea and toast. The baby needs nourishment." I stared at the simple meal, perfectly made toast, butter and jam, steaming chamomile tea, and felt tears threaten again. When had anyone last cared if I'd eaten? "Thank you," I whispered. Lorenzo sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. "How do you feel?" Confused, scared, grateful. I picked up the toast with shaking hands. All of it at once. That's honest. He watched me eat with that same intense focus he'd had at the restaurant, as if cataloging every detail. "I appreciate honesty, Elena. It's rare in my world." "What exactly is your world?" I asked between bites. "Gina called you influential, but that doesn't really explain." "I run a family business," Lorenzo interrupted smoothly. "Import-export, property management, investments. It's complicated and sometimes dangerous, which is why security is so important. You'll notice Marco and others around. They're here for protection." Import-export. The words were vague enough to mean nothing and everything. I wasn't stupid. I'd grown up in the city, heard the stories, knew the names whispered in certain neighborhoods. The Valentini family was old money, the kind that didn't come from legal means. "You're Mafia," I said flatly. Lorenzo didn't flinch. That's a crude term for a nuanced reality. But yes, my family has connections that exist outside conventional business structures. And Marcus? Was supposed to manage a small shipping operation. Instead, he got greedy and stupid. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Arranged for a rival family to hijack the shipment, split the proceeds, and blamed it on a territorial dispute. 6 men died in the retaliation, Elena. 6 men with families, with children. The toast turned to ash in my mouth. Marcus had caused deaths. My husband, the man who'd held my hand during the positive pregnancy test, who'd promised to build a life with me, had gotten people killed. I didn't know. I breathed. "I swear, I had no idea what he was involved in." "I believe you," Lorenzo said again, reaching out to tuck a strand of damp hair behind my ear. The gesture was becoming familiar, intimate. "Marcus kept you deliberately ignorant. Easier to betray someone who doesn't know your secrets." His hand lingered on my cheek, thumb brushing my cheekbone. The touch sent heat spiraling through me. Inappropriate, wrong, but undeniable. "What happens when you find him?" I asked. "Justice." The word was simple, final, terrifying. "Will you kill him?" Lorenzo's eyes met mine, unflinching. "Would it bother you if I did?" I should have said yes immediately. Should have been horrified at the thought. But sitting there, warm and fed and protected for the first time in forever, thinking about Marcus with his secretary while I'd struggled alone, "I don't know," I admitted. Lorenzo smiled, that dangerous, beautiful smile that made my stomach flutter. "Another honest answer. You're full of surprises, Elena Morrison." "It's still Elena Valentini," I corrected quietly. "Legally. The divorce isn't final." Something possessive and dark flashed across his face. "Not for long. We'll have my lawyers handle it. You'll be free of him in every way. And then what? I just stay here, play house while you hunt my husband? Is that so terrible?" Lorenzo leaned closer, his breath warm against my face. "Safety, comfort, everything you need. What's your alternative? Go back to that apartment and struggle until you give birth alone." He was right. And I hated that he was right, but there was something else happening here. Something neither of us was saying. The air between us was charged, electric, every casual touch feeling like more. "This isn't normal," I whispered. "The way you're looking at me, the way you touch me. It's not just about protecting family. Lorenzo's hand moved to my neck, thumb pressing against my racing pulse. No, it's not. Then what is it? Dangerous, he murmured, his face inches from mine. Forbidden. Everything we both know we shouldn't want. My heart hammered against my ribs. Lorenzo. Sleep, Elena. He pulled back abruptly, standing. Tomorrow we'll discuss the practical arrangements. Tonight just rest. He was gone before I could respond, the door clicking shut behind him. I lay back against the pillows, my body thrumming with tension and confusion, and something that felt dangerously like desire. The baby kicked, as if reminding me of reality. I was pregnant with his nephew's child, living in his apartment, caught in a web I didn't fully understand. But as I finally drifted towards sleep, warm and safe for the first time in months, I couldn't bring myself to regret the choice I'd made, even if it destroyed me. Sunlight woke me. Real sunlight. Not the dim gray that filtered through my old apartment's single grimy window. I blinked awake slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling, the soft sheets, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the city far below. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then it all came rushing back. Lorenzo, the Mercedes, this penthouse that felt more like a dream than reality. I sat up carefully, my hand automatically moving to my belly. The baby was quiet this morning, probably still sleeping, 6 months along, and already I could tell when she was active versus resting. I'd started thinking of the baby as a girl, though I had no way of knowing for sure. I'd skipped the anatomy scan, unable to afford it without insurance. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting Lorenzo. Instead, a woman entered, mid-50s, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing a simple black dress and sensible shoes. She carried a tray laden with breakfast that made my mouth water. "Good morning, Mrs. Valentini," she said with a warm smile. "I'm Maria, Mr. Valentini's housekeeper. He asked me to bring you breakfast and help you get settled." Mrs. Valentini. The name felt strange, wrong somehow, even though it was legally mine. "Please call me Elena," I said, watching as Maria set the tray across my lap. Scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, toast with real butter, orange juice, and, I nearly wept, bacon. "This is too much. Mr. Valentini was very specific about your nutrition." Maria fussed with the napkin, her eyes dropping to my belly with maternal warmth. "He said you're eating for two and haven't been properly fed. When's the baby due?" "Late January," I answered, reaching for the fork with shaking hands. "I think. I haven't. The doctor's appointments have been difficult to manage." Something flickered across Maria's face. Pity, understanding. "Well, that changes now, Mr. Valentini has already arranged for Dr. Castellano to see you this afternoon. Best obstetrician in the city." I froze mid-bite. "This afternoon? At 3:00. Marco will drive you." Maria moved to the windows, pulling back the curtains to reveal the full glory of the view. "Mr. Valentini left early this morning for business, but will be back this evening. He asked that you make yourself comfortable, explore the apartment. The kitchen is fully stocked if you get hungry. I'll be here until 6 if you need anything." She spoke with such casual efficiency, as if wealthy men regularly installed pregnant women in penthouses and arranged their entire lives overnight. "Maria," I said carefully, "how long have you worked for Lorenzo?" 20 years. She turned, her expression softening. "Since his father passed and he took over the family responsibilities. He's a good man, Elena. Demanding, sometimes frightening, but fair, and loyal to those he considers under his protection. Under his protection. As if I were some medieval damsel who needed a knight's shield. But wasn't that exactly what I was? After Maria left, I ate slowly, savoring every bite. The food was incredible, restaurant quality, warm and nourishing. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had bacon. Couldn't remember when I'd eaten without anxiety about where the next meal would come from. When I finished, I explored the apartment properly. In daylight, it was even more impressive. Art on every wall, furniture that looked sculptural, technology I didn't know how to operate. The kitchen was something from a cooking show, all stainless steel and granite. I opened the refrigerator and found it packed with fresh food, including items I recognized as pregnancy safe. He'd thought of everything. The guest room I'd slept in was just one of 5 bedrooms. I peeked into the others, each beautifully decorated, each clearly unused. At the end of the hallway was a door different from the rest, heavier, with a subtle security panel beside it. Lorenzo's room. I shouldn't look. Should respect his privacy, maintain boundaries. But my hand was already reaching for the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. Men like Lorenzo didn't leave vulnerabilities exposed. I turned away, feeling foolish, and found another door I'd missed, this one slightly ajar. Inside was an office, masculine and imposing. Dark wood desk, leather chair, walls lined with books in Italian and English, and on the desk, a laptop left open. I knew I shouldn't. Knew it was a violation, a betrayal of the trust he was offering. But the need to understand, to know what I'd gotten myself into, was overwhelming. The screen was locked, requiring a password, but beside it lay a folder, physical, old-fashioned, with papers visible at the edges. I opened it. Photographs spilled out. Crime scene photos. Bodies. Blood. My stomach lurched. But I forced myself to look, to see the reality of Lorenzo's world. 6 men, just as he'd said. Some young, barely older than me. One with a wedding ring visible on his lifeless hand. Marcus had caused this. Beneath the photos were documents. Financial records showing the stolen money, transcripts of phone conversations, surveillance photos of Marcus with Cassandra, and others I didn't recognize. Men in expensive suits, women dripping with jewelry, lists of names, addresses, business holdings. This was the evidence Lorenzo had compiled. His case against his nephew. At the bottom of the folder was another photograph, older and worn at the edges, a family portrait. Lorenzo, much younger, maybe early 20s, standing beside a beautiful woman with dark hair and Lorenzo's same gray eyes. His sister, perhaps, and beside her, a little boy with Marcus's features. Lorenzo's hand rested on the boy's shoulder, protective and proud. Family. He'd meant it when he said family mattered. Find anything interesting? I spun around, the folder falling from my hands, papers scattering across the floor. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, still in his suit from the night before, looking exhausted and dangerous. I'm sorry, I stammered, dropping to my knees to gather the papers. I didn't mean to. Stop. He crossed to me in 2 strides, kneeling to help collect the photographs. His hand closed over mine as we both reached for the family portrait. I said I don't enter rooms without invitation, Elena, but I never said you couldn't explore. I looked up at him, confused. You're not angry? Should I be? He took the photograph, studying it with an expression I couldn't read. This is my sister Isabel, and Marcus, at 7 years old. She died when he was 12. Cancer. I'm so sorry. I raised him after that. Tried to teach him honor, loyalty, the importance of family. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Clearly, I failed. The pain in his voice was raw, real. This wasn't just about money or respect. This was personal betrayal of the deepest kind. He was her only child, Lorenzo continued quietly, which makes him my only nephew and makes your baby. He looked at my belly, something complex flickering across his face. My great niece or nephew, the only family I have left, understanding dawned. This wasn't just about revenge or leverage. Lorenzo had lost his sister, and now he was losing her son too. The baby I carried was the last thread connecting him to the family he'd loved. What was she like? I asked softly. Isabel? Lorenzo smiled, the expression transforming his face. Fierce. Beautiful. She had a laugh that could light up a room, and she loved Marcus more than anything. He set the photograph down carefully. She made me promise before she died that I'd always protect him, take care of him. And now he's forced you to break that promise. Yes. The word was heavy with grief and rage. But I won't break the promise to protect what remains of her legacy, which means you and the baby are under my care, Elena. Permanently, if necessary. The intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. We were still kneeling on the floor, surrounded by evidence of violence and betrayal, closer than we should be. Why does it feel like more than duty? I whispered. Lorenzo's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing my lower lip. Because it is more than duty. From the moment you walked into that dining room, something in me recognized something in you. What? Survival. Strength hiding beneath vulnerability. The same darkness I carry. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. You should run from me, Elena. I'm not a good man. I've done terrible things, will do more terrible things, but I look at you, and I want. The intercom buzzed, shattering the moment. Lorenzo pulled back sharply, rising to his feet with fluid grace. Yes? His voice was clipped, controlled. Boss, Dr. Castellano is here for Mrs. Valentini's appointment. Marco's voice crackled through the speaker. 30 minutes early. Lorenzo glanced at his watch, then at me. Have him wait in the medical room. We'll be there shortly. The medical room? This apartment had a medical room? Lorenzo offered his hand, pulling me to my feet. I had a space converted. Thought you'd be more comfortable being examined here rather than in some sterile office. You've thought of everything. That's what I do. His hand lingered on mine, warm and solid. And Elena, the next time you want to know something about me, just ask. I'll always tell you the truth. Always. Always. He released me reluctantly. Now let's make sure you and the baby are healthy. Everything else can wait. The medical room was down another hallway I hadn't explored, fully equipped with an examination table, ultrasound machine, cabinets full of supplies. Dr. Castellano was a distinguished man in his 60s, with kind eyes and gentle hands. Lorenzo stayed for the entire examination, standing beside the table, holding my hand when the doctor pressed on my belly. His presence should have felt invasive, inappropriate. Instead, it felt right, like having someone in my corner after so long alone. The baby is healthy, Dr. Castellano announced, smiling at the ultrasound screen. Strong heartbeat, good size, positioned well. And Elena, your blood pressure is elevated but not dangerously so. Have you been under stress? I almost laughed. You could say that. Well, it should improve now. The doctor looked at Lorenzo meaningfully. Rest, good nutrition, minimal anxiety, the usual prescription. She'll have all of that, Lorenzo said firmly. Dr. Castellano printed several ultrasound images, handing them to me with a warm smile. Would you like to know the sex? I looked at Lorenzo, surprised to find myself wanting his input. He nodded. Yes, I breathed. Please. The doctor pointed to the screen, indicating something I couldn't quite make out. Congratulations, you're having a girl. A girl. My daughter. I stared at the grainy image, tears blurring my vision. Lorenzo's hand tightened on mine. When I looked up, his expression was unreadable, some mixture of joy and pain and fierce protectiveness. A girl, he repeated softly. Isabel would have loved that. After the doctor left, I stayed on the examination table, studying the ultrasound photos. Lorenzo busied himself putting away the equipment, his movements methodical. Thank you, I said finally. For this. For everything. Don't thank me yet. He turned, leaning against the counter. This arrangement, Elena, it's going to get complicated. Marcus will find out you're here. There will be consequences. What kind of consequences? The dangerous kind. His eyes were storm dark. He'll come for you, either to manipulate you or hurt you as revenge against me, and when he does, things will get ugly. Fear coiled in my stomach. Maybe I should leave. Find somewhere else. Somewhere he won't look. No. The word was absolute, commanding. Lorenzo crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands gripping my shoulders. You're not leaving. You're under my protection, and I protect what's mine. I'm not yours, I protested weakly. Aren't you? His gaze dropped to my lips, then lower, to my belly where his great niece was growing. You're carrying Valentini blood. You're living in my home, eating food I provide, under guard I've assigned, in every way that matters, Elena. You're mine. The possessiveness should have frightened me, should have sent me running, but my body was responding in ways I couldn't control. Pulse racing, skin flushing, a warmth pooling low in my belly that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "This is wrong," I whispered. "You're his uncle. I'm still legally married to him, I know." Lorenzo's hand moved to my neck, thumb pressing against my racing pulse. "But I stopped caring about right and wrong the moment you walked into that restaurant. The moment I saw him abandon you, pregnant and struggling. He lost the right to claim you, Elena, and I'm selfish enough to take what he threw away, and if I don't want to be claimed," his smile was dark, knowing. "Then tell me to stop. Tell me you don't feel this pull between us. Tell me you weren't thinking about me last night in that bed." I couldn't, because he was right. I had been thinking about him, his hands, his voice, the way he looked at me like I was precious and desired and seen. "I thought so," Lorenzo murmured, leaning closer until his lips were a breath from mine. "But I won't push, won't take what you're not ready to give. When you come to me, Elena, it will be because you want it, because you're choosing me, not running from him." He pulled back before I could respond, leaving me breathless and confused on the examination table. "Rest this afternoon," he said, his voice returning to that controlled tone. "Tonight we're having dinner together, properly, without interruptions. I want to know everything about you, where you came from, what you want, who you were before Marcus tried to break you." "Why?" "Because," Lorenzo said, pausing at the door to look back at me, "you're going to be in my life for a long time, Elena, and I make it a point to know everything about what's mine." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with ultrasound photos of my daughter and the echoing promise of his words. What's mine? I touched my lips, imagining what it would have felt like if he'd closed that final distance. Imagining his hands on my body, his voice whispering my name in the darkness. And I realized, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that I wanted it. God help me. I wanted Lorenzo Valentini in ways I'd never wanted his nephew. I spent the afternoon in a strange limbo, too restless to sleep, too overwhelmed to think clearly. Maria had left fresh clothes on my bed, another selection of maternity wear that fit perfectly. I chose a soft sweater dress in deep emerald, something that made me feel less like a charity case and more like a woman who belonged in a place like this. The apartment felt different in Lorenzo's absence, larger, emptier, like a stage waiting for its lead actor to return. I wandered through rooms, touching expensive things with careful fingers, trying to reconcile this new reality with the life I'd known just 24 hours ago. My phone, the cheap prepaid I'd been rationing minutes on, sat on the nightstand where I'd left it. I picked it up with shaking hands and scrolled through the messages I'd been ignoring. 3 from my former landlord, threatening eviction, 7 from debt collectors, 2 from the hospital where I'd gone for emergency care last month, demanding payment, and 1, sent just this morning, from an unknown number. "I know where you are. We need to talk. Marcus." My blood ran cold. How did he know? How could he possibly know I was here? I was still staring at the message when the penthouse door opened. Lorenzo entered, flanked by Marco and another man I didn't recognize. Shorter, stocky, with calculating eyes. They were deep in conversation, Lorenzo's expression carved from granite. "Don't care what it costs," Lorenzo was saying. "I want every transaction traced, every contact identified. He's getting money from somewhere, and I want to know." He stopped when he saw me standing in the hallway, clutching my phone like a lifeline. "Elena." His tone shifted immediately, concern replacing command. "What's wrong?" I held out the phone wordlessly. Lorenzo took it, his jaw tightening as he read the message. "When did this come?" "An hour ago. I don't know how he—" "Marco." Lorenzo's voice was sharp. "I want this number traced, now. And increased security. 2 men on the door. 1 monitoring the garage, full surveillance on all entry points." Marco nodded and disappeared into the office, the other man following. Lorenzo turned back to me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. "He can't get to you here," he said firmly. "This building has security that most government facilities would envy, but the fact that he knows you're here means someone talked. Which means we have a leak. Maybe I should leave," I said, hating the tremor in my voice. "Go somewhere he won't think to look." "No." Lorenzo's grip tightened. "Running makes you vulnerable. Here, You're protected. And Elena. His thumb brushed my cheek. I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not because Marcus is playing games. This isn't a game to him. He sounded... I swallowed hard, remembering the cold certainty in Marcus's voice during our last real conversation. He sounded desperate when he left. Desperate men do dangerous things. Then it's fortunate you have someone more dangerous protecting you. Lorenzo's smile was predatory. Let him come. Let him try. He'll learn what it costs to threaten what's mine. There was that word again. Mine. And this time, I didn't argue. Get dressed for dinner, Lorenzo said, releasing me reluctantly. Something nice. I'm taking you somewhere special. I thought we were eating here. Change of plans. If Marcus knows you're here, he's watching. So we're going to send a message. His eyes gleamed with dangerous intent. We're going to be seen together, publicly. Let him understand exactly who you belong to now. The possessiveness should have chilled me. Instead, it ignited something hot and reckless in my chest. What should I wear? Lorenzo's gaze traveled down my body slowly, appreciatively. There's a black dress in the closet, third door. Wear that. And Elena? He leaned close, his lips brushing my ear. Wear your hair down. I want to see it. Then he was gone, leaving me shaking and breathless in the hallway. The black dress was stunning, silk that flowed like water, cut to accommodate my belly while somehow making me feel elegant rather than awkward. It had clearly been chosen specifically for me, another detail Lorenzo had somehow anticipated. I did my hair and makeup carefully, using the expensive products I found in the bathroom. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The exhausted, broken woman from yesterday was gone, replaced by someone who looked worthy of attention, of desire, of protection. Lorenzo was waiting in the living room when I emerged, and the look on his face made my breath catch. He'd changed into a different suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and he looked devastating. Bellissima, he murmured, offering his hand. You're going to stop traffic. Where are we going? La Scala, best Italian restaurant in the city, also happens to be owned by the Moretti family, allies of mine, but with connections to everyone, including Marcus. Understanding dawned. You want him to hear about this. I want everyone to hear about this. Lorenzo guided me to the elevator, his hand possessive on my lower back. By midnight, every family in the city will know that Elena Valentini is under my personal protection, that anyone who touches you answers to me. The restaurant was everything he'd promised. Old-world elegance, dim lighting, the kind of place where deals were made and alliances formed over expensive wine. The maitre d' recognized Lorenzo immediately, ushering us to a private booth with the kind of reverence usually reserved for royalty. Eyes followed us through the dining room. I felt them like physical touches, curious, calculating, afraid. They're staring, I whispered as Lorenzo held my chair. Good. Let them, he settled across from me, his expression satisfied. By morning, Marcus will know you're not just staying with me. He'll know you're with me. But I'm not... I stopped. Because what was I, exactly? His nephew's abandoned wife? A woman under his protection? Something more complicated that neither of us had named? Lorenzo's hand covered mine on the table, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Aren't you? A waiter appeared before I could answer, presenting menus and wine, sparkling water for me, red wine for Lorenzo. We ordered, and I tried to focus on the food, rather than the way Lorenzo kept touching me. Casual brushes of his hand, his foot finding mine under the table, his eyes never leaving my face. Tell me about yourself, he said when we were alone again, before Marcus. Who were you? No one had asked me that in so long. Marcus certainly hadn't cared. Nobody special, I said quietly. Grew up in foster care, aged out at 18. Worked my way through community college but never finished. Met Marcus at a coffee shop where I was working. He seemed safe, stable, everything I'd never had. And he made you feel seen. Yes. The word was barely audible. For the first time in my life, someone chose me. Or I thought he did. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He saw vulnerability and exploited it. That's what parasites do, Elena. They find the wounded and feed. Is that what you're doing? The question came out sharper than I intended. Finding someone wounded and vulnerable. No. Lorenzo leaned forward, his intensity almost overwhelming. I'm finding someone strong who's been convinced she's weak. Someone resilient who's been beaten down. And I'm giving her the resources to become who she was always meant to be. And what do you get out of it? His smile was dark, honest. Revenge against Marcus, a connection to my sister's legacy, and his thumb pressed against my racing pulse. Something I haven't felt in years. Interest, desire, the possibility of something real. Real, I repeated, with your nephew's pregnant wife. Former wife soon, Lorenzo's eyes blazed, and the baby is family, mine to protect regardless of her father. But you, Elena? You're something else entirely. The waiter returned with appetizers, interrupting the charged moment. We ate, and Lorenzo asked more questions about my childhood, my dreams, the things I'd wanted before life had beaten the hope out of me. He listened with complete attention, as if every word mattered, as if I mattered. And slowly, I felt something unfurl inside me, something that had been locked away since Marcus left, the possibility of wanting again. Midway through the main course, a man approached our table, older, silver-haired, expensive suit. He nodded respectfully to Lorenzo. Mr. Valentini, forgive the interruption. Don Francesco. Lorenzo's tone was polite but cool. To what do I owe the pleasure? Merely wanted to pay my respects, and to meet your lovely companion. The man's eyes slid to me, assessing. I heard rumors, but seeing is believing. Elena, Lorenzo said, his hand covering mine possessively. This is Don Francesco Moretti, an old friend of the family. Pleasure, I managed, though the weight of the old man's scrutiny made my skin crawl. Marcus's wife, yes? Don Francesco's smile didn't reach his eyes. How unexpected, and how complicated. Not complicated at all, Lorenzo said smoothly. Elena is under my protection. I trust that information will spread appropriately. Of course. Don Francesco bowed slightly. Enjoy your evening. He retreated, but I could feel conversations rippling through the restaurant. Whispers, glances, speculation. He'll tell Marcus, I said quietly. Yes. Lorenzo lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that made my stomach flip. Within the hour, and Marcus will understand that you're no longer his to claim or hurt. You're using me as bait. I'm using us as a statement. His gray eyes held mine. There's a difference. Yes, Marcus will react, but he would have come for you anyway, Elena. This way he knows what he's facing. The food turned to ash in my mouth. And if he doesn't care? If he comes anyway? Then I'll be ready. Lorenzo's expression hardened, and he'll learn what it means to betray family. We finished dinner in relative silence, the air between us thick with tension and unspoken promises. When Lorenzo helped me into my coat, his hands lingered on my shoulders, and I felt the heat of him through the fabric. The ride home was quiet, Marco navigating through city streets while Lorenzo made calls in rapid Italian. I caught words here and there. Familia, protezione, vendetta, protection, vengeance, family. Back at the penthouse, Lorenzo dismissed Marco with instructions for overnight security. We stood in the living room, the city lights glittering beyond the windows, and suddenly the air felt too thick to breathe. You're afraid, Lorenzo observed, moving closer. Shouldn't I be? You've just painted a target on my back. The target was already there. His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing my cheekbones. I've just made it clear who stands in the way. And what if... My voice broke. What if he hurts you because of me? Lorenzo's laugh was low, dangerous. Elena. Sweet, innocent Elena. I've survived 3 assassination attempts, a war with the Russian Bratva, and a federal investigation that should have put me away for life. Marcus is a child playing at gangster. He doesn't have the skill or the balls to hurt me. Then why do you look worried? Because he did. Beneath the confidence, there was something else. Concern. Fear, even, though he'd never admit it. Because, Lorenzo said slowly, I'm starting to care what happens to you. And caring creates vulnerability. My breath caught. Lorenzo. I know it's too fast. I know it's inappropriate and wrong and complicated. His forehead pressed against mine, his breath mingling with my breath. But I look at you, and I see something I thought I'd lost when Isabel died. Hope. The possibility of family that isn't built on blood and violence. I'm pregnant with your nephew's child. You're carrying my great-niece, a little girl who will grow up knowing she's loved and protected, regardless of who her father is. His hand moved to my belly, splaying across the curve. And you're a woman who deserves better than what she's been given. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I don't know how to do this, how to be here, with you, feeling these things. Then let me show you. Lorenzo's lips brushed my temple. Featherlight. One day at a time, Elena. No pressure. No expectations. Just let me take care of you. Let me prove that not all Valentini men are worthless. I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries, protected my heart. But I was so tired of being strong alone, so desperate for someone to share the weight. Okay, I whispered. Lorenzo pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes searching mine. Okay? One day at a time. I managed a watery smile. But Lorenzo, if Marcus comes, if this gets dangerous, I'll protect you. His voice was iron and velvet. With everything I have, everything I am. You have my word, Elena. And a Valentini's word is sacred. He kissed my forehead then, gentle and chaste, before stepping back. Go to bed, he said softly. You need rest. Tomorrow, we'll start making plans. What kind of plans? The kind that ensure you and the baby are safe. And the kind that make Marcus regret every decision that led him here. Lorenzo's smile was sharp enough to cut. Sleep well, Cara. Tomorrow, everything changes. I went to bed, but sleep was impossible. I lay in the darkness, one hand on my belly where my daughter grew, the other clutching the ultrasound photos. Everything had changed. In less than 2 days, my entire world had shifted on its axis. And the most terrifying part, I didn't want to go back. Whatever this was, protection, obsession, the dangerous spark between Lorenzo and me, it felt more real than anything I'd had with Marcus. My phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. You think he can protect you? You don't know what you've done, Elena. You don't know what's coming. I stared at Marcus's words, fear coiling in my chest, but beneath the fear was something else. Something darker, more primal. The hope that Lorenzo was right, that Marcus would come, and that when he did, he'd finally understand what he'd lost. The next 3 weeks passed in a surreal blur of luxury and lurking danger. Lorenzo had been right. Word of our relationship, whatever it was, spread through the city's underground like wildfire. I could feel it in the way people looked at us when we went out, the way conversations stopped when we entered rooms, the way even hardened criminals showed deference that bordered on fear. Dr. Castellano visited twice more, declaring both me and the baby healthy, thriving even. My blood pressure had normalized, the constant anxiety that had plagued me for months finally easing under Lorenzo's watchful care. I'd gained weight. Good weight. The kind that came from regular meals and actual sleep. But Marcus's messages continued. Sometimes threatening, sometimes pleading, always watching. I see you getting into his car. Does he know what a whore you are? That baby is mine. You can't keep her from me. He'll get tired of you eventually. And when he does, I'll be waiting. Lorenzo saw every message. I'd learned quickly that nothing happened in his world without his knowledge. Each threat made his expression darker, more dangerous. He doubled security, then tripled it. Marco was a constant presence, along with 3 other men whose names I learned. Santo, Vincent, and a terrifyingly quiet man called only the Wolf, but Lorenzo himself was the most constant presence. He worked from home more often, spending evenings teaching me about his legitimate businesses, the restaurants, the property holdings, the import operations that were actually legal. He never hid the darker side, but he didn't force it on me either. And slowly, carefully, we circled each other like planets in gravitational pull, drawn closer each day, neither quite ready to collide, until the night everything changed. I was 7 months pregnant, round and ungainly, But somehow Lorenzo still looked at me like I was beautiful. We'd fallen into a routine, dinner together every evening, conversations that stretched late into the night, casual touches that felt less casual every time. That night, we were on the penthouse balcony despite the November chill. Lorenzo had wrapped me in a cashmere blanket, his arm around my shoulders as we watched the city lights. "I got the divorce papers today," I said quietly. "Your lawyers are efficient. Good." Lorenzo's hand tightened on my shoulder. "You're free of him legally. How do you feel?" "Relieved, sad, angry." I laughed without humor. All of it at once. "Is that normal?" "Completely normal." He pressed a kiss to my temple, a gesture that had become habit. "You're allowed to mourn what you thought you had, even if it was a lie." "Do you ever mourn?" I asked, tilting my head to look at him. "Your sister? Your nephew? The family you lost?" Something painful flickered across his face. "Every day. But mourning doesn't mean I stop living. Is that what I am? Your way of continuing to live?" Lorenzo turned me to face him fully, his hands cupping my face with devastating gentleness. "You're more than that, Elena. You've become—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I told myself this was about protection, about revenge, about duty to family, but that's not true anymore. My heart hammered against my ribs. "What is it about?" "You." His thumb traced my lower lip. "The way you hum while cooking breakfast. The way you argue with me about books, insisting that happy endings matter. The way you touch your belly when the baby kicks. Like you're already having conversations with her. You've made me feel things I thought died with Isabel. Lorenzo, I'm in love with you." The words were stark, honest, terrifying. I know it's too fast, too complicated, too everything. But I look at you and I see my future. Not just duty or protection. I see mornings waking up next to you, watching your daughter grow up, building something real. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "You can't. I'm pregnant with Marcus's child. People will say—" "I don't care what people say." His forehead pressed against mine. "I care about you. About her." His hand moved to my belly, covering the spot where the baby was kicking frantically, as if she could sense the emotion. "Tell me I'm alone in this. Tell me you don't feel it too." But I couldn't, because he wasn't alone. Over these weeks, Lorenzo had become my anchor, my safety, my unexpected salvation. And somewhere between the protection and the dinners and the gentle touches, I'd fallen for him too. "I feel it," I whispered. "God help me. I feel it too. But Lorenzo, this is dangerous. Not just the situation with Marcus, but us. What if—" He kissed me. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was possession and promise and everything we'd been dancing around for weeks. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me as close as my belly would allow, and I melted into him with a soft sound of surrender. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo's eyes were molten silver. "No more what-ifs," he growled. "No more waiting. You're mine, Elena, completely. And I'm yours." "Yes," I breathed. "Yes." He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I felt years of loneliness and fear burn away in the heat between us. His hands were everywhere. My face, my hair, my waist. Careful of my belly, but desperate nonetheless. "Inside," he murmured against my lips. "I need you inside." We stumbled into the apartment, shedding the blanket, Lorenzo's jacket. He guided me to his bedroom, the one I'd never entered, and I had a moment to register dark walls, a massive bed, before he was kissing me again. "Tell me if I hurt you," he said, lowering me to the bed with careful strength. "Tell me if it's too much." "It's not too much." I pulled him down, needing his weight, his heat. "It's not enough." What followed was slow and reverent and overwhelming. Lorenzo worshipped every inch of my body, murmuring in Italian, his hands gentle on my swollen belly, while his mouth drove me mad. He made me feel desired, cherished, claimed in ways Marcus never had. Afterward, I lay wrapped in his arms, my back to his chest, his hand splayed possessively across my stomach. "I love you," he said again, his voice rough. "Whatever comes next, whatever happens with Marcus, you need to know that. I love you too." The words felt momentous, a point of no return. Is that crazy? Loving my husband's uncle? Former husband, Lorenzo corrected. And yes, it's crazy. We're crazy, but I don't care. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Lorenzo reached for it, his expression darkening as he read the screen. What? I asked, fear creeping in. Marcus. Lorenzo's voice was ice. He's here, in the building. I sat up, clutching the sheet. That's impossible. Security, he's not alone. Lorenzo was already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. He's got help. Professional help. He grabbed his phone, barking orders in Italian. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. Lorenzo, no. He kissed me hard and fast. I love you. Remember that. Then he was gone, the door slamming behind him. I scrambled into my clothes, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the buttons. From outside the bedroom I heard shouts, crashes, the unmistakable sound of gunfire. The baby kicked frantically and I pressed my hand to my belly. It's okay, I whispered, though I was lying. We're okay. More gunshots. A scream. Then silence so profound it was worse than the noise. I waited in Lorenzo's bedroom, counting seconds that felt like hours, until finally, the door opened. Lorenzo stood there, blood on his shirt, a cut above his eyebrow, but alive. Behind him, Marco dragged an unconscious Marcus, his face bruised and bleeding. It's over, Lorenzo said, his voice rough. It's done. I ran to him, throwing my arms around his neck despite my unwieldy belly. He held me tight, his face buried in my hair. You're bleeding, I sobbed. Not my blood. He pulled back to look at me, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? The baby? We're fine. We're okay. I touched his face, needing to feel that he was real, alive. What happened? Marcus hired mercenaries, thought he could storm the building, take you by force. Lorenzo's smile was cold. He was wrong. Very wrong. I looked at Marcus's unconscious form, feeling nothing. No love, no pity. Nothing but relief that it was over. What will you do to him? Lorenzo's expression hardened. That depends. What do you want, Elena? I want him to leave us alone, forever. Done. Lorenzo nodded to Marco, who dragged Marcus away. He'll be given a choice, disappear completely, or face justice for what he's done. Either way, he's out of your life. And the baby? He'll sign away all parental rights. The lawyers will handle it. Lorenzo cupped my face. She'll be yours. Ours, if you'll have me as her father. Fresh tears spilled over. You want to raise her? Marcus's daughter? I want to raise your daughter, Lorenzo corrected. The one you've protected and nourished and loved even when her father abandoned you. The one whose family because you are. And because, his hand moved to my belly, I love her already. How could I not? She's part of you. I kissed him then, tasting salt and love and promise. Yes, I whispered against his lips. Yes, I'll have you. As her father, as my husband, Lorenzo suggested, pulling back to look at me. It's too soon, I know, but Elena, I don't want to wait. I've waited my whole life for someone like you. Marry me. Let me make this official. People will talk. Let them. His smile was fierce. They'll talk about how Lorenzo Valentini fell in love with a woman strong enough to survive betrayal and brave enough to choose love again. They'll talk about how lucky I am. You're insane. About you? Absolutely. He kissed me again, soft and sweet. Say yes, Kara. Give me forever. I thought about everything. The danger, the complications, the scandal. But then I felt the baby kick, felt Lorenzo's hand covering mine on my belly, and I knew. This was my future. This man. This life. This unexpected love. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll marry you. 3 months later, Isabel Rose Valentini was born on a snowy January evening, screaming her displeasure at the world with impressive lung capacity. Lorenzo held her first, tears streaming down his face as he counted her fingers and toes. She's perfect, he whispered, placing her in my arms. You're both perfect. I looked down at my daughter, dark hair, gray eyes that would probably change, 10 perfect fingers gripping Lorenzo's thumb with surprising strength. "She looks like you," I said, smiling through exhausted tears. "She looks like Isabel." Lorenzo's voice broke. My sister would have loved her so much. We'd married quietly a month before, just paperwork and promises in front of a judge. Nothing fancy, nothing public, just us choosing each other, making it official. Marcus had disappeared. Rumors said Mexico, others said further. Lorenzo had made it clear, if Marcus ever came back, if he ever tried to contact me or Isabel, there would be consequences. Final ones. I didn't ask for details, didn't need to. That part of my life was over. Now, holding my daughter while my husband, the thought still gave me chills, pressed kisses to both our foreheads. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. "Thank you," I whispered to Lorenzo. "For what?" "For seeing me. For choosing us. For making me believe in happy endings again." Lorenzo smiled, that dangerous, beautiful smile I'd fallen in love with. "Thank you for being brave enough to give me a chance, for trusting me with your heart, and her heart." I looked down at Isabel, who'd fallen asleep against my chest. "And her heart," Lorenzo agreed softly. "I promise you both, I'll spend every day earning that trust. Being the man you deserve, the father she deserves. You already are." He kissed me then, gentle and reverent, mindful of the baby between us. "I love you, Elena Valentini." "I love you too." Outside, snow fell softly on the city, covering everything in white. A fresh start, a clean slate. In Lorenzo's arms, with our daughter sleeping peacefully, I finally understood what home felt like. Not a place, not safety or security or wealth. Home was this: being chosen, being loved, being seen for exactly who you were and treasured Marcus had left me broken in a threadbare apartment, pregnant and abandoned. Lorenzo had found me in that darkness and offered me light. And somehow, through all the danger and complications and impossible circumstances, we'd built something real, something lasting, a family, not born from blood or obligation, but from choice, from love, from two wounded people finding healing in each other. "Tell me what you're thinking," Lorenzo murmured, his arms wrapped around both of us. I looked at him, this dangerous, powerful man who'd become my everything, and smiled. "I'm thinking about happy endings," I said, "and how sometimes they come from the most unexpected places. Is that what this is? Our happy ending?" "No." I kissed him softly. "This is our happy beginning," and it was. Despite everything, the scandal, the violence, the impossible circumstances, we'd found our way to each other. Two broken people, one tiny miracle, and a love that defied every rule and expectation. The city would keep talking, rumors would keep swirling, but inside this penthouse, with snow falling outside and love surrounding us, nothing else mattered. We were home. We were family. We were finally, impossibly, completely happy. And that was the greatest victory of all.